that this session is really so not about me, okay? Because I happen to be one of the probably least savvy of technology folks, as Bruce can attest to, as my colleague in the English department. But I do welcome you here, and I also want to stress that we're not trying to solve all the problems here. What we're trying to do is to do what responsible teachers like to do, is to enhance our pedagogy. So despite, or not despite, but it doesn't matter how many other things that we do at this university, teaching continues to be a priority. Now, how it's valued in certain places may be different, but everybody teaches. And that's one of the things that has kept me sort of passionate about what I've been doing here for 30 years, is the fact that I can teach and exchange ideas. But I'm also concerned with issues of innovation and issues of diversity and inclusion. And I recognize right here at the beginning that we may not all be on the same paragraph when we start talking about what does it mean to be inclusive, what does it mean to be innovative. And that's what I like, or even diverse. And that's what I like about this series of perspectives we've assembled here, is that each is coming with something new. So since you already have the bios before you, I'm not going to read through those, but ask you to read through them at a later time. So I'm going to be real teacherly now and ask you to put them away so you won't be tempted to look at them, but to focus, because we have a very tight window to try to get a lot done. And the idea is to have them talk to you about their specialty areas, and then we can sort of excite people and then continue this conversation. So that's what we're trying to do. So, you know, I appreciate if you would sort of, and this sounds very teacherly, is give us your undivided attention, and then there'll be an opportunity toward the last 20, 30 minutes for us to hear what's on your mind as different ideas have come forward. Does that sound like we can do that in an hour? Okay, so it is not a TED Talk, and this is the most talking I'm going to do. But I will say that each comes with a slightly different perspective. That my connection to this notion of technology and inclusion has come through something that Project Humanities created about 3 years ago called Hacks for Humanity. And it was a notion of bringing technology and humanities together, but around this notion of, are we losing our humanity? So how can we use technology towards something we call social good, something that is bigger than ourselves? And so we bring together, you know, students, faculty, staff, community folks, because that's important to us, that ASU is sort of leveraging its place and being socially embedded for 36 hours to create technologies. And what's interesting about this for me is that you don't have to be a coder in order to do this. We are trying to change that culture, that in order to go to a hackathon, you need to know how to code. You may or may not learn how to code. But this is really about hacking, which is community building. So we've got high school students, this last one we had in October, 36 hours of coffee and monster drinks and all the junk food you can imagine, building these incredibly technologies. One that had to do with suicide prevention by looking at social media tweets. This last one was about, that one had to do with knowing the driving rules in other states and countries different than your own, so that you don't get a ticket, kill somebody, or get killed. I mean, we sort of overestimate how important that is when we travel. So that's the power. So that's what I look at when I talk about, what are we looking at and how are we moving across disciplines, how are we moving across communities, and we can talk about that later. But since that's who I am, we'll go we'll go to Dr. Adara Allison, who wants to come up and tell us a little bit about disability services and technologies to make more accessible courses. Dr. Allison?
So that's the...
Okay, and surprisingly enough, it has pictures of all of us. Okay. 4 guiding principles when I consider technology and the purpose of getting information out. I always look at whether information is perceivable, because, whether you're teaching a class, teaching a piano lesson, teaching a child to play checkers, you want them to get the information, and the only way that the information gets through is if it's perceivable. Operable looks at whether the on button or the play button works. So if you're a person using a screen reader and your screen reader cannot find the play button, you can't make it play and you can't hear what's on the screen. So that's one of the things with the operable. Understandable is making sure that a person can understand what the content is And robust just means it's got to have some vibrant energy to it. It's got to be worth consuming. Who wants to study drab stuff, right? You want to study stuff that's important and exciting to you. One of the things I look at in terms of technology is the changes in the way that we educate. Hands-on used to be the way that everything was taught. We've shifted things to lecture and text a lot, and now we're shifting into information age technologies. And to me, one of the crucial aspects is that disability is both situational and structurally and constructed, okay? So if you think situationally, if I can't read, but you're going to say, here, this is the camshaft, put this here and do this. Okay, I can do that, you know. But if you say, okay, now I want you to go read the book here, it tells you how to do the camshaft. I can't read. I've lost something there. So the situation of the disability changes according to where we are. I heard a report on NPR one time about tribal cultures and how 1/10 of the hunting party was the person who was colorblind and therefore saw all of the changes in the shapes in the bushes. That meant that's a tiger, not a leaf. Okay? So, you know, think about it. It's situational. Note takers. When you think of note takers, you think of people with a piece of paper and a pen. These are all note takers. Okay? So if you have a class and you say, okay, we're not having any electronic technology in this classroom, that eliminates the person who has a pen that records the lecture while they're paying attention, because if they really try to write it all and they have a learning disability, a processing disability, they lose 5 minutes for every 1 minute they're writing. Okay? Telephone. How many of you record things on your phone? You know, so no technology in class, but I wanted to capture what you said. People record things on their watches now. They bring digital recorders. This is a Braille note taker. It allows a person to type using the Braille code and then to read it. These are little pins that come up so they can check and make sure they typed what they meant to type, so that a person who can't see you can take notes without that pen and paper because they can't see the paper. There's not much point in writing things down. You know? And then this is a cart provider. Let me see if I can get this right. Communication access, real-time, computer assisted, real-time. See, Lori's our expert on this. She hires the cart providers. Computer assisted real-time captioning. So they're actually taking down everything said in the classroom. The student in the classroom has their laptop in front of them because everything you say is showing up on the screen in front of them. But if you have a class that says no laptops, then you've singled out that one student with a disability because they're the only one allowed to have a laptop. So those are some of the things that I thought about in terms of technology and inclusion. I put some resources here. They are in your handout, so you don't have to memorize them or write them down. And that's me.
Thank you very much. We will have opportunities to follow up, but we just want to get it out there first, and then we'll sort of have our conversation. Dale Johnson comes to us from ASU Online and deals specifically with adaptive learning technologies for gen ed courses. Dale.
So I want to get a quick feel for who's in the room. How many faculty members do we have? Great. I want to talk a little bit about pedagogy. And then staff members. How many work with technology on a daily basis? I recognize a couple colleagues. Good. So I'd like to focus a little bit on an area that I work with, which is general education. I work with adaptive courseware to support our general ed courses. And right now we're supporting Bio 100, Chem 101, Physics 121, 3 math courses, economics, psychology. We're expanding into history. We just rolled out 2 history courses. So what we're doing is we're providing some foundation for the transformation of this pedagogy. I want to say that we recognize this is the norm, but I don't think this is normal. And I think we should start challenging 2,500 years of broadcast approach. We've built this into our structures throughout the campus, all the facilities, all of our approach, the lectures, the titling of our staff. everything that we have done sort of points in this direction. But I think we need to challenge this, and technology can help us do that. I'll point to work of a colleague, Scott Freeman, at the University of Washington, who has done studies for a decade on large lectures. And Dr. Freeman has found that he can statistically prove that large lectures are racist and sexist. And he came to ASU probably a year ago. I think, Amy, you might have invited him. And he made the case that we haven't really recognized what an impediment this is to campus inclusion, because we always considered it the norm. As we think through how technology can help us, we should look at it as ways to open up these channels of communication to include more people. That should be part of the premise that we're working on. So within this structure, how would we ever answer these questions? In a broadcast model, we have no means to determine who needs help till after the first exam, or some other mechanism that gives us a little bit of feedback. So what we're trying to figure out now with adaptive courseware and other systems on campuses, how can we get to these answers as quickly as possible? Because the faculty really need this in order to be responsive to the students. In order to use the technology effectively, we want to transform the pedagogy as well. And that means we want to put students on a level playing field. We want them to start interacting with their peers in decision-making, problem-solving, critical thinking exercises. So technology becomes a transformative tool to get to a higher order learning challenge for the students. And you can go in the library, in the basement of Hayden Library, we have learning studios now that have been built, and you'll see spaces like this, which we've equipped with what I think are the essentials for this kind of approach. Flat floor, round tables, whiteboards and markers, and a projection system to communicate with the group. We also use microphones because it's a large 75-seat space. But think about technology as being part of this transformation to get us to the new approach. So pedagogically, what we're asking them to do is, before they come to class, we want them to use the adaptive systems to acquire and analyze the foundational knowledge. That will set that baseline so that when they get to class, they will be able to interact at a meaningful level. This also creates new feedback channels. So if I'm a faculty member, I can see that a certain portion of my students aren't getting a particular concept, and then I can adapt to their needs. So we expect the faculty to take the output from the analysis and begin to adapt. So when they get into class and they have case studies that are already designed, we invite you to come and observe these classes if you're interested, if you think that might be something that would work for you pedagogically as a faculty member. I've got a couple of great lead faculty members who are excited about this and willing to talk with others about it. Once they're engaged, that breaks down a lot of the barriers that we traditionally had with a large lecture, because they can see their peers as persons and not just others, and that they begin to interact at a more direct level. We actually mix them up throughout the semester so they don't get too comfortable. So we ask them to start with one table. After the second exam, we take the results of the exams, we mix them all up again. We don't tell them that we look at the background, but basically we're trying to make them get out of their comfort zone to communicate with others. And then finally assimilate this information. We want them to think through these critical problems and come up with new ways to put it together in their own mind for future use. Now, our results have been really good on Bio 100, so I put this up as an example. In large lecture, we lose a lot of students to boredom. They just drift away. We really never know this because they don't tell us. They just don't come to class. And we see it, first day the classroom's full, 15th week there's a third of the class in there. But what we've tried to do is we've tried to transform that relationship between the students and their peers and the faculty in order to create much more connection. We think that's reflected in the withdrawal rate. If we can get that down under 5%, that's really exciting. We had one section where it was 0. We had no withdrawals, which I had never heard of before. That was the first time I've ever seen that. So we're really excited about the pedagogy transforming that relationship. And then on the other side, the software helps the students retain and utilize that knowledge more effectively. We see that with higher grades. Anything above a C is considered success in our evaluation. So we want them to be successful. If we can keep them in the class, we know we can educate them. And that's the challenge that we face. So we're building on this, expanding to new disciplines. We've got psychology rolling now. We hope to get economics in the next year or so, and we want to continue to build on the success. But I want to challenge everybody to think differently about the pedagogy as part of this cultural inclusion. We can't assume that students are going to come and feel comfortable in our model just because it's been here for 2,500 years.
Dr. Bruce Matsunaga is going to talk to us a little bit about his work on user experience and also universal design for learning.
So I was asked to come in and talk a little bit about user experience and universal design. And my approach on this will be directly from one of my online courses. This is a course that I teach in digital literacies for master's level English students through ASU Online. And basically I'm just sort of hacking the learning experience for these students. The Roosevelt quote, it's often used for this, but I mean basically that's the sort of essence of the type of hacking I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the Mr. Robot, breaking into systems sort of thing, but just adapting what we have and what's available to meet your needs. For this particular course, I wanted them to learn how to use WordPress at a very basic level. I mean, they're not going to walk out of this class and be system admins for a WordPress site, but they should know how to create their own WordPress site, how to control the theme, how to control blog entries, how to control privacy, all of that sort of stuff. And we used WordPress comments instead of Blackboard discussions, just as a natural extension of being embedded in the WordPress environment as part of the learning experience. And I was a little bit surprised at what I found. And right away, even before the class started, I was getting emails about different types of things. And it was clear that most of my students were using mobile devices as their primary form of engagement with the course. And that somewhat surprised me, just thinking most English majors would probably be on a computer, at least a laptop or something like that. But as I learned, many of them, almost, it was 3/4, were K through 12 teachers, and they had a home computer that was shared with their entire family. And so that use was always at a premium, so they ended up doing many of their discussions and their reading and research all on their mobile devices. And so these are screenshots from our current Blackboard system. And I say current because eventually we are going to change to either Canvas or the new Blackboard, and it will be much better than this on a mobile device. This is not a responsive display. There is a Blackboard Learn app, which improves the experience, but every student that I had that I suggested this to said, oh, well, yeah, I'm out of space on my iPhone. I really don't want to download an app. I get it. I mean, Google Photos made fun of this in one of their ads a while back, the one that it kept popping up saying out of space when they're trying to take a picture. And so it takes a lot of clicks and a lot of zooming around to actually do their posts using the discussion forums in Blackboard. So this is the experience in WordPress, and there's a few other features that I thought I'd point out. And this is not just to say that you should all run out and use WordPress. I mean, this met the learning goals of the class. The immersive experience was what we wanted so that they would feel comfortable using it. And I had to use Blackboard for other things, grading, everything, couldn't have anything like that for FERPA reasons. But you do have the ability to do @mentions, so you can notify an author or another person in the class of a post and say, hey, you should look at this. This fits well with what you're discussing, your ideas. You can also, there's alternate forms of interaction. You can like posts and like comments, so that's another way. And it's just really easy for them to go to the next post and back up. They can go through posts much easier. And I found that on average, the students were doing 3 posts per assignment day, and they were only required to do 1 additional post. So they were actually replying more than I'm normally used to seeing in a discussion format. at the end of the course, I did a Blackboard survey. Those of you who, so I asked them, they had taken other classes through the ASU system using Blackboard, and so I asked them, I said, what did you prefer for, class discussion? And you can see 100% chose WordPress as their choice. And what I found from discussing with them is that the mobile experience was what really seemed to make it much more streamlined for them. Also, all the course content, as I noted here, was provided for them, because since a lot of my course is structured around digital humanities, internet research, all of that stuff is open source, because that's part of the philosophy of those areas of research. And WordPress was able to display that all in a responsive design to make it much easier for them to consume. With the modes of engagement, I mean, this is something that we all try to do as teachers, but I tried to provide them with some background reading. So some of this is fairly heavy stuff. The Moretti is I think 25 pages. There are illustrations in it, but it's a long read for them. Schultz is a criticism of distant reading, and then a video from the guys who created Google's Ngram. So reading millions of books and then putting in search terms and trying to pull out information from that. So this provides them another perspective on the same topic, but with a video interaction and illustration, and then some actual projects that are using these concepts to further cement what we're talking about with this instrument. And then they had a chance for reflection. What's not shown in this segment, this was a Friday post, was the weekly walkthrough where I kind of go through and I use TechSmith Relay. It's available for all of us at ASU. And I go through the course, actually going through the site and saying this is what you need to do. These are what areas you should be looking at, and always let me know if you have any questions. I also used as another form of engagement Google Hangouts on Air. So here, what I was doing was I was bringing in guest scholars who were working in a particular area. Allegra here was doing some research in elderly communities and their use of technology. And so she was sharing some of her results and what she found. And it fit nicely with the reading we were doing about ethics and internet research. But it provides another way for students to engage with material and with the instructor, with the guest scholar. And you can see some of them would pop in with their actually using video, some of them wouldn't. They always had the option with this to watch it via YouTube and then put in comments or questions. And the fact that it was on air, that type of Hangout, meant that I could save it on YouTube and they could watch it later. So if the students couldn't make it to the synchronous viewing and interaction, they could watch it later. I did these all as unlisted Hangouts, so it wasn't open to the public. You had to have the URL to get to it, that sort of thing. And I also used a doodle poll, I'm sure you're all familiar with that, to find the best day and time combinations for my students so that we would hold those Hangouts at that time. And it turns out it was fairly late. Usually 7 o'clock our time, that was when they were available. Pretty late in the evening. Which makes sense for teachers, I guess, with families, because you have to get everything done and then you have some time to actually do your work. I also offered this as an option for office hours, just the regular Google Hangout. Also, I gave them my cell phone number. They could text, they could email a course, they could, call on the phone if they wanted to. Most just prefer to email. These are English MA students. They tend to be more verbal like that. But a few did want to do video chats, phone calls. And I had a couple of students who really loved the walkthroughs videos because they just identified themselves as being more visual learners, and that even following screenshotted text instructions was hard for them. They much rather see it in action going. So a little bit different. I prefer the screenshotted step-by-steps. But that's it. That's what I found from that course. And so maybe you can go from there.
All right, let's think of panels. The one thing I like, the other thing that I like about this conversation, this is not just about teaching what it is we're doing, but I think everyone, I can certainly speak for myself, has learned something from being in this session. And the idea is that this doesn't sort of become the end of this conversation, but you're all registered, and we'd love to know if you'd like to continue this, because you're offering some wonderful resources. The packet that Amy has put together also has links and further resources there, but clearly we could all benefit from having more resources to do better what it is we're doing, both in and out of the classroom. So I'm so glad we had this time together just to share a laugh or sing a song, but you know, there comes a time when you just have to say so long. So thank you very much for coming.